Welcome to the Week 3 edition of the Sharp Angles Fantasy Podcast, where Rich and I will discuss an exciting Week 2, a bounce-back Week 2, the Bengals offense with Joe Burrow on injured reserve, the fantasy future of Emeka Egbuka, and much, much more, so make sure you stick around. What it do, everybody? My name is Raymond Summerlin. This is the Sharp Angles Podcast, the fantasy football edition, the Thursday edition of the Sharp Angles Podcast. And if we're talking fantasy football, if we're getting ready for Week 3 of the fantasy football season, there's only one person to do that with, and that is the one, the only, the Swami of Konami, Mr. Rich Rebar. How you doing, friend?
We're doing real good, coming off of a really strong Week 2. Offense has scored some points, which was nice. It was nice. Maybe we just count Week 1 forever as Week 4 preseason. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Week 2 bounce back. We saw a lot of points scored. There were actually passing touchdowns in Week 2. We had some really nice lineups in DFS. Didn't win player props. We can't get the whole thing to line up, right? Like last week I had a really good DFS day and good in my fantasy manager leagues, but wasn't that good betting. In Week 1, I had like an awesome betting week, and then was just okay in DFS. So it's just like we're trying to get we're trying to sweep the leg here and get all three to line up.
Yeah, it was funny that we did really well in DFS. I even I didn't do great in DFS because I went all in on Justin Fields. We can talk about that decision here in a second when we're trying to remember not to overreact to just a 2-game sample. But I went all in on Justin Fields, and that didn't go well. I would say it didn't go great for me, but the other hits that we had got me at least to break even. And when you can break even and you had whatever it was 50% of a terrible quarterback, hey, it's not a bad week. Props, what are you gonna do? But I do want to bring up those Week 2 successes because on your DFS picks, which the DFS picks are available to all Sharp fantasy football subscribers. They come out on Saturday morning. It basically is just Rich's player pool. So if you're building out your lineups, you're either doing it by hand or using an optimizer. He's giving you who he's putting into his lineups, his player pool, and who he's really focusing on and who he wants to be above the rest of the field on in his game. So it's a great way to get an idea of who he's playing. It's a really good tool. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, Week 2, we had a really, really good week. So make sure you go and check that out on Saturday. But to that kind of point I was making about Justin Fields is we came out of Week 1. We even talked last week about we need to make sure we're tempering expectations. We're not reading too much into whatever's going on. And then I come out in Week 2 and immediately go, yeah, but maybe Justin Fields is just good now. And it turns out he's not. But we're in the same place here in Week 2. We're going to talk about the Lions, right? The Lions against that Bears defense go wild in Week 2. Now we're coming into Week 3. What are our expectations for them? So it's just even more than Week 1, I think we need to remind ourselves this week, it's still only a 2-game sample. At this time last year, the Saints had the best offense in the league, right? That's kind of where we are. So we always have to kind of temper these expectations based on
the Eagles had the worst defense.
Eagles
had one of the worst defenses of the NFL at this point last year. Everyone's like, gotta play everyone against the Eagles. And
that ended up not working out great. But it's one of those reminders that we're still building the sample. We don't actually know much about these teams.
Hopefully the Eagles have the inverse of that because this offense looks really, really bad. We need that offense to come back to life.
That's going to be a main topic. In fact, that's going to be the first topic of our agree or disagree segment. Before we get to that, though, I do want to make a point. They're actually running a great sale on that fantasy football package, which again, Rich's DFS previews, his game-by-game preview of every game this week, his fantasy rankings, all of that in our Sharp fantasy package. Right now, you can get all of our exclusive Week 3 fantasy football content for just $1. That includes detailed game previews for every matchup, weekly player rankings, DFS analysis, waiver wire reports, everything you need to get prepared for the weekend. Use code ANGLES, ANGLES, to join our weekly fantasy football package for just $1. You can get Week 3, all of the Week 3 content for just $1. Search sharp.football, lock in your discount, and take control of your fantasy season today. Let's get on to agree or disagree. This is where I throw out a statement and I ask Rich, do you agree? Do you disagree? And then we kind of talk through the nuance of it. And I guess we should just get started here with the Eagles. And the statement is the Eagles passing game is broken.
Well, I agree it is broken. The question maybe should be, can we fix it? But I mean, it's absolutely broken.
Yeah, it's done.
I mean, right now the Eagles have 3 passing plays of 10 or more yards. The next closest team has 11. They're the first team since 2010 to go 2-0 without a passing touchdown. It's really rough. They right now have the fewest plays on offense of 15 or more yards. They have five plays. They have 3 offensive plays of 20 or more yards. Like, they're just not generating any big plays. And I've seen a lot of people like comparing it to the Brian Johnson Eagles. The Brian Johnson Eagles were 7th in scoring. Like, we would throw a party if we had the Brian Johnson Eagles. So we hope Kevin Patullo can figure this thing out. I would still bet on just the amount of talent here across the entire offense, that something manifests itself to a greater degree than what we've had. The offensive line is still loaded. You still have Saquon. You still have Devontae Smith. You still have Arthur Juan. They're getting Dallas Goedert back this week. You still have Jalen Hurts. Like, the ingredients are here. We need to put them together in a dish and make it something that's serviceable right now, because this is like literally that meme where I forget what it is. The guy on the yacht gets the dish and he pulls it up. There's nothing under it. Like, that's what we're getting right now, outside of just Saquon has the 2 touchdowns, but they're running Saquon to loaded boxes. They're not doing anything creative with the offense in terms of like play action and player movement. I will say they should get pushed this week against the Rams. I do think the Rams are going to push them. And the last time that AJ Brown was on a football field where Emmanuel Forbes was playing significant snaps, the beast was awoken. So maybe we just need Emmanuel Forbes to be the one to unlock this for us.
Yeah, it was a real, and I took that personally, moment for sure. On the Eagles, I think the thing that's most concerning to me is to do that against the Chiefs in that big game on the road, right? I still think the Chiefs defense is good. It hasn't been great so far, but I mean, again, small samples. I think they're good. But based on what we saw from the Cowboys last week, and having no big plays against that defense, and what we saw, they revived Russell Wilson's starting job in New York, to then come out in week 1 and see what we saw from the Eagles. It's just, it's really concerning that this is what we're getting. And one of those big plays you mentioned, they had that big play that was just Devonta Smith going and making a great play because he's a great receiver, but it wasn't like it was a great like play design that got him wide open, like we saw with Tyquan Thornton, a couple times. And so it's just, even the big plays don't look great. Their idea of getting, feeding AJ Brown the ball, which, to be fair, they did feed AJ Brown the ball, but like that idea, just like, okay, well, is he going to get 10 catches for 37? Like, what are we doing? It just, none of it looks coherent in the passing game.
90% of his targets are within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. If this held for another 15 games, he'd by far the lowest depth of target AJ Brown's ever had in his career. Like I said, maybe if Emmanuel Forbes will help us, but it's the structure of the offense though. With Kevin Patullo, and it's funny because no one knew who Kevin Patullo was, and now everyone knows him for the wrong reasons. Feel bad.
You mentioned and like with the structure of the offense, you mentioned it. The Eagles are 8th, and their percentage of running back runs into loaded boxes of at least 8 men at 44.9%. I mean, you can't do that. By the way, do you know who's first in that metric? I actually have it up now because I wanted to get the actual
of like number. Running back runs into loaded boxes.
Running back runs into loaded boxes.
The Seahawks.
That's number 1 with a bullet, 64%. Right. Whew. We have to fix that.
Our boy Clint, man. Well, yeah, it's a Clint. Clint's gonna Clint.
Yeah, we're gonna have to fix that. All right, let's move on to topic 2 here for our agree or disagree. The Bengals offense will remain fantasy viable with Jake Browning at quarterback.
I agree, fantasy viable, but everyone is coming down. I've seen some strong optimism on the Bengals, and I think it's okay to say like they might not die. Like, these guys aren't going to wither away, but we've done this before with wide receivers getting backup quarterback play. We did it with Jamar Chase 2 years ago with Jake Browning, and I'm seeing him still ranked as like a top 5 player. Like, if we were for rest of season rankings, even in like a lot of season long ranks, he's still ranked as either the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 this weekend against a Brian Flores defense on the road with a backup quarterback. I feel like that's very much optimistic. So it's one thing for Jake Browning to come in and throw against the Jaguars, who We're playing even a backup cornerback and had to elevate, Travis Hunter to playing significant snaps on defense. Tyson Campbell and Jordan Lewis have been really rough to start the year as well. And also, when Browning played 2 years ago, Chase's only good game, what Browning came against the Jaguars. The little Alanis Morissette meme, so be it there. But we've done this with just so many guys with these backup quarterbacks. They take a hit, and we have to price in a hit for Jamar Chase. I think if we were drafting today, I think I would have him more towards the 1-2 turn. I don't think he's going to be a bad football player, but we are going to live with some volatility. And if we're going to live with volatility with Jamar Chase, who operated with Jake Browning the last time he was on the field, he had one game as a top 30 scoring receiver. I don't think it's going to be to that degree, but also he's not going to just be a weekly wide receiver one. There's going to be a lot of weeks where we have these down weeks. And then what does that do for a guy like T. Higgins? What does it do for Chase Brown in the offense? Because Chase Brown, the thesis on Chase Brown was he was Kyron Williams with catches. He's not an efficient running back, but was in an offense where he's getting all the workload and their offense was going to score points. And if the offense isn't going to score points, and by the way, he's not running as many routes or catching as many passes either, is this as optimal of a situation for Chase Brown? I also think Taj Brooks, you're stashing him. He's probably one of the guys you can outright cut, because what's the upside now if he takes over for Chase Brown? That's lowered as well. So there are degrees where this just trickles down through the entire offense and kind of lowers the floor for all these players. And this immediate kind of schedule that the Bengals and Jake Browning are running into is not great. They play at Minnesota, at Denver, then they play at home against the Lions, and at Green Bay. By then they play the Steelers, who by then could be healthier on defense. We'll see what happens. It's not a very favorable outlook either. Browning himself, I think, will be okay if you're in Superflex 2 QB streaming stuff. He certainly ran around a lot too. But one other thing to think about when you go back and look at when Jake Browning was inserted in this offense in 2023, it was also a different style of offense. The Bengals that year, even before Browning took over under Joe Burrow, were a very low ADOT, throw stuff at the line of scrimmage offense. And that really hasn't been the case last year or the start of this season. So he's going to be operating in a different capacity. Jake Browning actually led the league in completion percentage when he came in. It's because he had the lowest ADOT in the NFL. He also had the lowest expected completion rate too, because he threw 32% of his passes behind the line of scrimmage when he took over last time. So we'll see. This, like I said, we'll see. But I'm surprised that people are still penciling in the high end outcome for these Bengals pieces.
And you made a point about in the worksheet about how they're going to keep throwing, which I do think is true. And their defense is, not great either. But I do want to make the point that even though they kept throwing with Browning whenever he took over in 2023, they did throw at a lower rate while remaining a pretty pass-heavy offense. They were weeks 1 through 10 with Burrow. They were third in neutral dropback rate. They were 10% over their expected pass rate. Weeks 12 through 18, so Browning took over in week 11. Week 12 through 18, 12th in neutral dropback, 2% over expected. That's a pretty big drop, right? Yeah. And we're dropping from not as high of a point with this version of the Bengals offense. Now, it might not matter because their defense is bad and they might just lose a bunch of games, and none of the neutral game script or what they want to actually do ends up really mattering from a pass game perspective. But to your point, I didn't have Browning as a streaming option this week in the waiver column because the matchup's not great, and I don't know what this is going to look like. And the game state is bad because on the other side, we have another backup starter, and we know exactly what the Vikings, want to do with their offense, even when JJ McCarthy was in there. And so we'll have to see what it looks like with Wentz. And so this week, I'm not very interested in using Browning as a streamer. Moving forward in better matchups, I do think it will be there. I think we will see good games from Chase. We will see good games from Higgins. Chase Brown, I mean, I'm out of an eliminator right now because of Chase Brown, right? That lack of efficiency as a rusher is not going to get better without Joe Burrow. He's not getting as many catches. We need the touchdowns. It could be tough going for Brown, who's a guy that, obviously, I've liked ever since he entered the league. So it's not looking as good.
Yeah, and we were pricing in, on the other side of the ball, we were pricing in the transition from JJ McCarthy to Justin Jefferson, at least our site was. And, we've seen that kind of proof, at least and again, it's only 2 weeks. We'll see if Carson Wentz, revitalizes, Justin Jefferson, and maybe they throw the ball a little bit more, but, he's not running the routes. And we kind of thought that because the signal was the Vikings want to run the football more, right? And what are they going to want to do against the Bengals with Carson Wentz? Right, especially if they get this offensive line back together, because Christian Darrisaw practiced in full yesterday, and if we can get Ryan Kelly out of concussion protocol, the offensive line's in a way better shape than it's been the first 2 weeks as well.
I don't look at ownership percentages early in the week, but I assume that Jordan Mason is
Oh
chalk,
yeah,
right?
he's going to be super chalk this week.
Yeah. I might even eat that chalk. I might be interested in that. We'll have to see.
It's week 3, so we don't have as many cheapies as we opened the first 2 weeks with. Like all the cheap players are now at quarterback because of the injuries.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about a few of those maybe as we move on as well. All right, one more agree or disagree here before we get on to the game previews, and that is that Emeka Egbuka is a sell high for fantasy football.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree with this one. I was a little bit below market on him coming into the year for some of the reasons that have manifested, but the touchdown deodorant has kind of masked some things. You know, obviously the 2 touchdowns in week 1, he gets in the box again. I mean, doesn't even 100 yards receiving, hasn't had over 20% of the team targets. My take on him coming into the year was, hey, this Bucs team, I expected offensive regression, and we're getting it. Like, Curtis tried to give us some hell in our chat that we're not seeing regression because Baker Mayfield's still throwing touchdowns. But this team is 23rd in offensive plays per game. Baker Mayfield's thrown for under 6 yards per pass attempt in both games. The immediate schedule is still not looking great for them, although the Jets matchups looks better this week than it did entering the season. I figured still is going to be Mike Evans is the lead target. That's happened in both games. Chris Godwin is eventually going to come back. It sounds like he could play as early as next week. So all these things have happened. He's just scored those 2 early touchdowns. Now I do think he's a young enough player to where you could say, hey, he'll earn more targets moving forward. I wholeheartedly agree with that as well. But where he's being valued as kind of like a set and forget wide receiver 2, I feel like is still above where I would have him for the rest of the season. Now, keep in mind too, there's no healthy offensive lineman for the Buccaneers. I just saw today too, before we got on, Michael Jordan, their left guard, missed practice. So they will eventually get Tristan Wirfs back, maybe next week, week 5 at the latest. But Luke Goedeke might not play. They put Cody Mock on injured reserve. He might miss the rest of the season. Like, they might play down 4 offensive lineman starters on Sunday. And as bad as the Jets looked last week, they still looked good in week 1. Like, this still could be an offensive environment for a team that's been 23rd in yards per play through 2 weeks. Not one that's very tantalizing for opportunities either. So, I would move Egbuka. Here's one for you. I'm in a league where Egbuka got moved for Justin Jefferson already.
I would much rather have Justin Jefferson than Egbuka. And to be clear, we're talking about in redraft seasonal leagues. We're not talking about dynasty leagues. No, Egbuka looks like a good player. He is. The dynasty arrow is still pointing way up. Obviously, they've got older receivers in Evans and Godwin, and so we're in on Egbuka from dynasty perspective. From just from a redraft, and some of the numbers that really stood out to me for him: wide receiver 59 in yards per route run, wide receiver 55 in target rate per route run, and that's without Godwin, who, like you said, is coming back. And so everything points to, if you can get rid of him this week, maybe he gets a couple more touchdowns in this game before Godwin gets back and you get rid of him. If you get Justin Jefferson for him, you do that. Like, I am in on doing that for sure. All right, that's the end of agree or disagree. Let's move on to the game previews. But before we do that, I do want you to remember that you can read the complete player-by-player preview for every one of these games, as well as every other week 3 game as part of the Sharp Fantasy Package. And right now we are running a special deal. You can use the promo code ANGLES, that's ANGLES, to join our weekly fantasy football package for just $1. So you can get every preview for this week, Rich's week 3 fantasy football rankings. You can get his week 3 DFS picks, his player pool for just $1 for week 3. Go to sharp.football now to check that out. All right, let's move on and talk about some of the games this week. We've got the premier game of the week, I would call it, on Monday night, and that is the Lions at the Ravens. A reminder, you kind of mentioned it with the Bucs. We record these on Thursday morning, so we haven't even seen a injury report for this game yet. And so just keep that in mind as we're going through this. If there's an injury we miss, you'll do on Friday or Saturday. That's why. We got the Lions at Ravens. Ravens 4.5-point favorite, 52.5-point total. I think the biggest thing for the Ravens last week is we watched that offensive explosion, and we saw the 4 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson, and everything was exciting. And then you looked at the rushing box score, and it wasn't so great for Derrick Henry. And I mean, I don't think we're worried about Derrick Henry moving forward, but I think you made a good point in the worksheet about how this is the kind of thing you have to worry about for Henry. We didn't see it a lot last year, but this is the lows that you can experience with a player of his archetype.
Well, what's crazy is that, it still came as like a huge home favorite, but
Yeah.
I definitely want to continue to follow this Browns defense, especially this week with the Packers. I think it's gonna be really cool to see what kind of happens with them because this Browns run defense has been straight up gnarly through 2 weeks. Mason Graham looks, I mean, it's gonna be really fun to revisit this Travis Hunter trade, like 10,000 foot view, like down the line to see because Mason Graham has been dominant. They absolutely wiped away Derrick Henry in the first half of the game. And the Ravens, like they were running the ball so badly that they were like, we're not even gonna try anymore. Like, we're just not even gonna try. We're gonna put the hands of Lamar Jackson. That's what I think makes the Ravens even more scary because it's one thing when you have the marriage of this Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry backfield, which puts defenses in hell. But then when you take that away and Lamar just takes over as Lamar Jackson, like it's just still so scary for the upside of this offense. For them to score 40 points in that game is still kind of outlandish. The Monk and Lamar marriage has been something so far,
And
but
the touchdowns, like that was the hilarious thing about it is who are the touchdowns going? They're going to, they're going to Devontae Walker, who, by the way, I still have had stashed on a best ball dynasty.
Oh,
bench.
yeah, sweet.
It was a great day for me when I saw those happen because I do like him as a player. I still have him stashed in the Deep Dynasty League, but it was funny to see like, oh yeah, we're not even getting Zay Flowers or Bateman even on the end of these, or God forbid we get a target for Mark Andrews. Like it's just the funniest offense, and it doesn't matter. And that throw he made to Hopkins just. Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, it was so crazy. Yeah, I mean that's the one bugaboo for the Zay Flowers run out because Flowers has started the year in such a dominant fashion, is that he just still can't get these red zone and end zone targets. They keep throwing to all the other guys. It's happened 2 years in a row. But yeah, I mean, I'm really curious, and I know that we're talking, Lions, Ravens, but I'm really curious because anytime the Packers have had a lead these last 2 years, we've just seen them sit on the ball. But I do wonder if like the Browns run defense is that good that it just forces the Packers to kind of stay more aggressive through the pass. Like this is kind of a test for that this week, this matchup with them being favorites.
And to that point, and I think, the Browns were so bad last year that, you lose track of it. But I looked it up to make sure I was remembering correctly. They were third in yards allowed before contact on running back rushes last year.
They're allowing negative yards per running back carry before contact.
We were deep into last season before that changed for them. Like there was a time last season, like I think it was even into week 6 or 7. Again, this is off the top of my head, where they were still at negative yards allowed per rush to running backs. Like it was, they were that good before contact. Yeah. They were that good last year. And like you said, they made a big addition who looks to be, really good this year. So yeah, that run defense if we're thinking about Derrick Henry moving forward, that run defense, I think.
I mean, they had them in the game. Like the defense, I mean, it was 10-3 at halftime. Lamar thrown for 4.5 yards per pass attempt at that point. And like you can only hold for so long as a pass defense. Like but it was wild to see the Ravens just outright abandon the run. That's how good the Browns run defense was. Because in week 1, you're like, oh, the Bengals couldn't run on them. You're kind of just like, all right, whatever. And then when you especially in a week where they talk just mad noise to Derrick Henry, like you've got defenders like calling out Derrick Henry, and then they backed it up. Obviously scoreboard, but they did their thing.
You brought up Zay Flowers. I do think that's interesting. You brought up kind of the concern with Flowers. It's a concern we're going to continue to have, but
he looks great,
and he's kind of like quietly having the exact same season as Jackson Smith-Njigba. And we keep talking about Smith-Njigba, but we don't talk about the fact that Flowers is absolutely dominating this, targets and air yards and all of that in an offense that we're much more interested in, or passing offense, at least we're much more interested in being a part of. And it feels like that's kind of getting lost in the wash a little bit.
Yeah, and Njigba's still attached to like a low volume passing team too, right? And except for his guy Sam Darnold, and this is Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great overlap, and he has started with like in a really favorable spot, with the likely injury and more passing. Right now, Lamar Jackson is second in the NFL in throw rate to wide receivers at just under 77% of his throws. His career high, and obviously because he's had such a run out with Mark Andrews, is only in a season 61.9%. So And now that Andrews isn't being involved, especially with Isaiah Likely out, is concerning. So it just feels like this is another matchup, especially when you look at what the Lions do structurally, to be another really strong Zay Flowers game in terms of earning targets, beating man coverage. Since the start of last year, he's been targeted on 28% of his routes against man coverage, team high 27% of the team targets, so just under 2.7 yards per out run. And to start this season, only 2-game sample, he's been targeted on 35% of his routes against man coverage, 3.7 yards per out run. Lions still, Kelvin Shepard's rolling back kind of the Aaron Glenn approach of we play man coverage here, we play aggressive defense. I'll be curious to see if they roll that back out, because if they do that, then Zay Flowers is just teed up again for like another really strong outing. We just hope that throw to him once in the red zone, guys.
Yeah, just a touchdown. Can we just get a touch?
This is happening to Ladd again too, because last year Ladd was never like they didn't throw to Ladd in the red zone, and so far through 2 games, it's like the same run back where it's like, well, you got us down here, but we got these other guys we're going to use.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that game in a second, but it is like the things people were worried about with Keenan Allen don't exist, but the thing that you weren't actually maybe that worried about, you probably should have been based on kind of his career, is like, oh yeah, he's just going to take all the touchdowns. And
for reference, I do an article on this every summer. And I had these notes on Zay Flowers and Ladd McConkey in the summertime about like their red zone and end zone usage. And because last year in a season where Lamar Jackson threw 41 touchdowns, Zay Flowers only had 7 red zone targets and 5 targets in the end zone on those red zone targets. So it's like that, like this is structurally like a game plan. Like this is a part of the game plan.
Let's move on and talk about the Lions a little bit here, because obviously we come out of week 1 concerned. We're concerned about even like the way that they were running the offense and what we saw from John Morton in week 1. I don't think we have those concerns as much anymore after what happened in week 2, but it was against the Bears. And I'm interested in kind of what version of the Lions offense do you think we'll see kind of moving forward?
We record the show on Thursdays before the Thursday night game. And last week, we had the Packers on last Thursday night, and they looked awesome again. They really adjusted, they adjusted the game plan for Jaden Daniels. It was Jaden Daniels' worst looking game of his career to this point. Finally, it took the second season for him to have his welcome to the NFL moment, but he kind of had it. And it's like, I remember on Friday doing my shows and saying like, oh man, if the Packers wouldn't have played Thursday, the Lions would be a lot less owned on Sunday DFS. Because I think a lot of people watched that game and were like, oh, it was just more to do with the Packers than necessarily the Lions. Now, I will say, John,
can we talk about something just real quick on the Packers? Like there was so much, and then this might have just been my algorithm feeding me more like normie takes, but there was so much about this Packers defense that people were like, well, they got Micah Parsons, but they had Micah Parsons and who else? And I was like, did you not? This defense was great last year.
Yeah.
And now they have Micah Parsons. Like, they have the best safety in the league. They added Nate Hobbs, who, has been injured. Like, what are we doing? This team is so good.
They're an awesome pass defense.
To me that we're surprised by this. Like, you shouldn't be surprised by this. This is something that should have been expected from them.
Yeah, Jeff Hafley looks like on the forefront of like early, like this dude be a head coach next year forefront.
Boston College fans in tears, but here we are.
But we did see John Morton get back to some of the stuff that we saw, like, internally work for the Lions while he was there. Because anytime you had these first-time play callers and they come out and do something like John Morton did in week 1, and you're just like, well, why didn't you just stick with the script that you knew? And he got back to it. Jared Goff was under center for 61.8% of his dropbacks. On Sunday. In week 1, it was 41.5%. They used pre-snap motion on 62% of his dropbacks. So it was 51% in week 1. They used play action on 46%. It was 28% in week 1. Now we need to see proof of concept going back on the road against what we still believe is a good defense. The Ravens' defensive metrics may never look good because of the game states they're always in. But this is still what I believe is going to be a better defense than what it was last year. So we have to deal with the Jared Goff on the road stuff, the Jared Goff outdoor stuff. Like now run it back against a team that we believe in, right? You failed the test in week 1. You showed us, hey, we can still punch above our weight class, especially against an opponent we should dice. Now go on the road and show us that week 1 was an anomaly. That's what we're looking for here.
How worried are you about Jamison Williams' usage? Because obviously he had the big game because he got the big catches. But one of the things we saw at the end of last season was him getting more consistent target
Mhm.
shares, and we haven't, seen that. Especially like I said, he had the big game last week, but we didn't see that target share there. It seems like I know Laporta didn't have a big game in week 2, but he has seemed more involved in the offense than he was at the end of last season. So how worried are we about Jamison Williams here?
Yeah, I think right now for a 2-week sample of Lions, we believe it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like they're not as bad as week 1. Week 2 was obviously an optimal apex run out, scoring the 50 burger. They're probably, if they even are a high scoring team, it'll be in like the high 20s, mid to high 20s. And if we're expecting some regression, my take this entire offseason was not so much for like Amon Ra and like even potentially Gibbs. It was like these ancillary guys are the guys that are going to feel any regression. And that is looking to be like it will be Jamison Williams. I mean, all the reports this offseason have been like kind of false to start the year that he was going to like push Amon-Ra St. Brown to be the primary lead target. I don't think anyone really bought that to that degree, but he's only at 13% and 14% of the team targets. He had the 2 big plays. We know we can still get those. Like he's that fast. He's a fast human being. He might be like kind of like the new like home run king, right? Like the Tyreek zone. I thought he was going to house the first catch and run. It just felt like he ran out of gas. I think he might have run like 120 yards in total on that play, like zigzagging back and forth. But yeah, I mean, I feel like he's going to be the guy that like week to week, you're going to have a tough time sitting because, the big play exists, but we're not going to see the big kind of consistency that we saw at the back half of last year where he was getting 5 catches per game, I think in 7 of his final 9 games. I don't think we're going to see that either. That's why I never really could push him up to where he was going in terms of ADP. If any of the guys that I drafted my one main event team with, Thorman and Evan, they really wanted to take him. And I just kind of was like, all right, I got outvoted. And so like, I'm regretting that pick still. I'm going to let him remind him about that all the time.
That's the only way forward. All right, let's move on and talk about the Broncos at the Chargers. A big game, a game that could this decide the division? That's kind of where we are at this point in time. Chargers -2.5, totals 45.5. We're recording this again on Thursday morning. Ladd McConkey was a DNP on Wednesday. I haven't seen any real news on it. Have you seen any news on it as we're recording here? So
well,
we'll
they're
have to
West
wait.
Coast, so we won't. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to just wait and see kind of what happens there. So if there's news that breaks after record, we'll go. I do think it's interesting to talk about the Chargers offense because this Broncos defense is not normally a spot we would want to attack, right? But they obviously did not do great last week against the Colts. You mentioned in the preview for this game, the worksheet preview for this game, again, available at sharp.football. Use promo code ANGLES to get the weekly fantasy package for just $1. You mentioned that Justin Herbert had some success against them last year.
Yeah, and it's interesting is the first time these teams played, the Broncos did what they've done largely the last 2 years, under Vance Joseph, which play a lot of man blitzing, a lot of aggressive defense. And when they played Herbert again, they really dialed that back because when they tried to blitz him in the second game, he threw for 16 yards or pass attempt. They're like, whoa, like maybe we should do this. And,
that seems good. Is that a good number? I don't know. That seems good.
Yeah. So it's like. And the other thing too is like when we've seen the Broncos play these teams that are kind of like a one set mindset where like they can't run the football and TB determined for this Chargers, but so far it looks like they can't run the football. We'll let the sample size build out, but I think that's where they're feeling the offensive line, rotation of losing Rashawn Slater is in the power run game. But we've seen some of these teams really have some success against this Broncos defense and get them coaxed into some shootouts. We saw it with Joe Burrow at the end of last year. We saw it with Jameis Winston in that Monday night game. And then, obviously they had the Colts had a more balanced approach, but like the Broncos will play in some of these shootouts and the Chargers are like, man, they are just winging the ball all around. I mean, even, last week they threw the ball 13% over expectations, 19% on first downs. And if like they're going to put the hands in Justin Herbert and we know the receivers are good, I get caveat, we believe Ladd McConkey will be okay and potentially be up for this game. And if they come in with all 3 receivers, it allows them structurally to move these guys around because they can sacrificial lamb Quentin Johnson if they want to Patrick Surtain. Yep. And then they've still got Ladd and Keenan Allen rotating in the slot. Shane Steichen had Vance Joseph in a blender last week against those man blitzes, like see if he rolls that back. But I think this game offers a lot more shootout appeal than it might look on the surface. We were kind of talking about before the show. This is our first really good DFS late swap slate. because we have some good 4 o'clock pivots and we have the one chalky game. Cowboys-Bears is going to be really popular. So if you're owning, players on Cowboys-Bears and you didn't have your 1 o'clock guys run so hot, like you're going to have to come off Cowboys-Bears and get into, Broncos and Chargers and 49ers and Cardinals. And this game, I think, offers just outright upside to warrant interest anyways. Because like I said, these teams scored 61 combined points last time they played in LA as well. So this game could be fun and be a lot more high scoring than I think it looks like on the surface.
And speaking of kind of like the pivots here, although I assume Troy Franklin is going to be popular coming off of last week. But it is interesting to talk about kind of this Denver passing game. Obviously, Courtland Sutton's not coming off a great game. It was his lowest target share, except like he had one worse target share game since the start of last season.
He had a 0 target game in that Thursday night game against the Saints.
And that's basically it. And then we saw Troy Franklin come out and he is the only wide receiver other than Courtland Sutton to have a route participation rate over 85% since the start of last year. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some other names that were on that list above 80% that it didn't work out for them. Josh Reynolds randomly in week 1 of last year. Devon Vele, neither of whom play for the team anymore, by the way. So maybe that's not a great sign for Troy Franklin as we move forward. But everything about that breakout, it wasn't just the performance. In fact, I wish he didn't get the catches and touchdowns that he got last week, because he would have been cheaper on the waiver wire and he would be less popular in DFS. But like the usage was there. And I just wonder, is this real, or are we going to get burned again by another Sean Payton secondary wide receiver?
I would say that one other thing too is if he would have had all those routes and targets in a game where Courtland Sutton also got targeted, it would have been more bullish, because, when Courtland Sutton is not getting targeted, well, targets have to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So like we would have loved to see them coexist. I think that's when like I'll fully buy that he's like a staple in the offense, is when they're both coexisting as fantasy relevant together. But I do believe that Troy Franklin, like this is constant. Like this has been a constant kind of drumbeat. Like all preseason, they were talking about Troy Franklin and how good he's looked. He got more opportunities in the preseason. In week 1, he got some opportunities and utilized those. So like it's constantly propelled forward for him. So I don't want to ignore it either and say it's nothing. Now I just want to see the marriage of like, can these two guys be fantasy relevant in a game together? Because Courtland Sutton's not going away. Like he got paid again this offseason. He's still the alpha. He is the lead target in this offense. We know he is the red zone guy still in this offense too. So we need Franklin to have a usable target share and a fantasy viable target share in a game where Courtland Sutton is also doing that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also, like, we were looking for what that secondary target was going to be all summer. Some of us hoped it was going to be Evan Ingram, and he's just it's just not running routes. And so it doesn't matter. Some of us, and I actually do mean us on this one, I mean me specifically, hoped that it would be Marvin Mims stepping into that role. Mims did get us a touchdown last week. That's awesome. But he ran a route on what? Like
he's got to be like the worst practice player ever. Like there has to be something, because even last week the snaps he played were relevant. Like he caught
a touchdown. Yeah, like. I don't know what he did to Sean Payton. I have no idea what Marvin Mims has done to Sean Payton. But
it's 3 years in a row though. Like, because when he touches the ball, good things happen, but then just like doesn't play.
Exactly. And he played behind. It's also important in week 1. He didn't run as many routes as Troy Franklin in week 1 too. So like we're there, and obviously he had the big mistake. So that all of that points me to, we need a secondary option. Like you said, we've had this drumbeat for Franklin now the entire time. I was, by the end of draft season, drafting Troy Franklin at the back of drafts. So it doesn't seem like it's happening for Pat White. So, that makes me think this is real. I am going to run it out. I think you should have added him in leagues. I'm going to try to play him in DFS as well. But to your point, like there's also just like a complete rug pull opportunity here for us. Speaking of rug pulls, RJ Harvey, people who drafted RJ Harvey, not looking great right now. What are we doing with this Broncos backfield?
Yeah, and I wrote in the tiers this summer about RJ Harvey. I said, if you're drafting him, you better be ready for him to get single-digit touches all of September. I like wrote out this game plan. I was like, if you're taking Harvey in the 4th, 5th round, and I have him, but those rosters needed to be insulated with a guy that was going to have early season touches. Like on a lot
Tony
of my
Pollard.
RJ Harvey.
You needed to draft RJ Harvey and Tony Pollard.
I was drafting dudes like Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams, who were kind of gross picks, but I was like, if you take Harvey, like you need one of those guys. You need a bridge back for Harvey to ramp up, because that's exactly what's happened the first 2 games. And this week was even less of a split than it was in week 1, because in week 1 it was kind of like a true 50-50 until the very end of the game where Dobbins was the closer. This game opened with just Dobbins in control. He had 4 of the 5 backfield touches in the first quarter, 7 of the 10 backfield touches in the first half. He has all 3 backfield touches inside the 10-yard line now through 2 games, and he's done nothing to squander those opportunities, right? No matter what you think about J.K. Dobbins' big picture, to this point, Sean Payton has not watched 2 weeks of film and said, I need to stop giving him the ball.
Yeah.
Like, that hasn't happened either. So Dobbins is like the one guy I think you can still play for the touchdown equity. The one still flying the ointment here is that Tyler Bidet is still like in here in like some Travis Cadet type capacity. And it's really kind of throwing a weird, yeah, just, because Dobbins isn't catching any passes either. Because like, even though Dobbins is like the one dude we say can play and could have a touchdown opportunity, he also, if he doesn't have a touchdown opportunity, is like kind of useless. He's kind of like just a brick, like in fantasy, because he's not catching passes. So like he could have 65 yards rushing and like, cool. Like, okay. Like, so he still has to, so it's made everyone worse with Tyler Bidet still being involved here. Like, we need to get him out the picture for sure. We got to get him out of here.
You've unlocked a core memory for me with Travis Cadet.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't even thought about that.
He's used 3-man. He's done 3-man backfields before. Yeah. Like,
well, he was in the league until 2018, which I wouldn't have guessed that was the case. I mean, like if I was going for like the 3, like we're going with Pierre Thomas, right? Like you went deeper down the list there with Travis.
Well, that's like the level of what we're talking about with Tyler Bidet, right? Like he's out here just running routes and stealing some catches that could go to one of these guys. We actually want him to catch a couple balls.
Yeah. I believe the route split was Dobbins 10, Harvey 10, Bidet. Again, we went back to this a couple years ago. Please call yourself Batty. That's such a much better way. But Bidet 9 was the split that we saw. And so like in terms of routes, and I believe they all 3 got 2 targets. And so, yeah, it's not ideal there. I talked before the season because I was not in on Harvey. I do not have it. I think the only times I drafted RJ Harvey was when you and I did DraftKings drafts together. And I think we ended up with him on every one of those teams. So I'm hopeful that this changes in the future. But like, we just came off a season of watching the Broncos give at that point, not good runner, Javonte Williams, all of the snaps ahead of more efficient runners because they trusted him and they trusted him in pass protection and all of those things. And now we have Dobbins come out here and he's not even giving them the reason to bench him, right? Like, he's being relatively successful. And so we'll see if it changes. Like, he's a rookie. You're not playing rookies for week 2. You're drafting rookies for the stretch run. I get it. We'll see what happens.
He's like the least of the dudes there's panic about, which is fun. Like, because I think maybe just because the Sean Payton stuff, people like there was a level of expectation. I think a lot of people that took Harvey were at least on board with like the things I laid out. Like early on, like this is going to be kind of the game plan and it's Sean Payton layer as well. But like, I'm seeing like the rookie
other
panic.
Side of this game. Yeah, the other side of this
game.
The
rookie panic. Yeah, you have Hampton, J.T., obviously Travion, like the rookie Matthew Golden, like people like I don't know, man. Like is it because like people finally started to read analysis from like people that were like kind of put stuff out there and like, you do want to add these rookies their values, but then people expected that to be like week 1 and week 2. Now I get J.T.'s a little bit different because he was like a round 1, round 2 pick. And then Hampton was like a 2-3 turn pick. So like initial expectations with draft capital were a little higher, but like you gotta let some of this stuff breathe.
Yeah, the Hampton stuff though, with Harris getting more work in week 2, and then obviously they have the fumble. Although I don't believe that was actually credited to him. I believe it was credited to Herbert.
It was Herbert's suck. Well, listen, Harbaugh didn't credit that to Justin Herbert.
That's the more important. That is the more important.
Your box score was saved, but the coach said no, man.
And I wonder if Jim Harbaugh is the kind of guy that would care about that kind of stuff and really make a big deal about it. I wonder if that's the case. Yeah, I mean, I'm still in on Hampton. I expect that we're going to see some explosive plays out of him and things are going to work out. But we'll have to see. You brought up Javonte Williams, which brings us to our next game. Cowboys at Bears. Bears -1.5, 50.5 point total. We might need a new "we were wrong" graph graphic this time, or at least I was wrong graphic, and that's about Javonte Williams. What if I told you that Javonte Williams is almost a yard above his expected rushing yards per attempt? What if I told you Javonte Williams is averaging 3.4 yards after contact per rush, which is basically where he was pre-injury in Denver? We can find the tape of this podcast, and on before the season, I said, if he comes out, if Javonte Williams comes out and he's good, I'll be wrong. And I will be happy to be so because I missed old Javonte Williams. And as it turns out, I was wrong. And I'm actually happy to be wrong because I've liked, it wasn't great week 1, but I think what we saw last week was actually good. And so, like, what if Javonte Williams is just kind of good now? It's a really interesting situation.
Yeah. And what if I told you, based on the first 2 weeks of football, how important was Clayton Adams for the run game of the Arizona Cardinals? Because he was the offensive line coach with Arizona last year, and the Cardinals in 2 really kind of pristine matchups, they haven't been able to run the ball. They haven't been able to run the ball, and the Cowboys are running the ball. And it's like, man, was Clayton Adams kind of the key behind the mask here for Drew Petzing? Like, again, only 2 weeks, but I'm just saying, we got a clear overlap. So credit him, because even the small touches Miles Sanders has gotten, he's looked all right.
Miles Sanders actually leads the league, I believe, in rushing yards over expectation.
Because he had the long
because he had the long run in week 1. Sure, but it's still like one of those things where you're like, well, that's interesting, right? That's what we're looking at. Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. And if the running game continues to be successful, it seems like Williams is just going to be that guy, force him out for Jaden Blue. And that means that if you didn't draft Javonte Williams, you were wrong. And I was wrong, and we'll make a new graphic. We'll have a new, I will have a new, I was wrong about Javonte Williams. And again, I'm happy to be so. But the new Javonte
because
Williams,
because we get a guy, right? Like, people always think about like takes. We want as many good players in fantasy football as possible. Fantasy football is way better with more good players. So especially when you have this guy that became a value in terms of draft capital for a lot of people. Like I said, I accidentally got him on teams. Like I told you, like when I was getting Harvey, like Javonte Williams and ETN were like my number 1 targets on Harvey drafted teams, because I was like, oh, I get a month of these dudes and like then see where like if Harvey's ramping up yet. And now I might just like outright have a guy that might be better than the guy I drafted at the 4 or 5 turn, and we'll see what kind of is stable. But I feel good about that situation. And you feel good about this matchup because he's facing a team that allowed 142 yards to the Minnesota backfield in week 1. They come back and allow 170 yards and 2 touchdowns to the Detroit backfield in week 2. This Bears defense looks real rough 2 weeks in. We'll see if they can figure things out as we go along, but it's another really great spot for Javonte Williams.
Do we want to talk about the new Javonte Williams, and that's DeAndre Swift, and kind of what we're doing with that? Or would you rather go positive and wax poetic about Roma Dunze? I'm giving the choice to you.
I would rather talk about Roma Dunze. It's the same stuff with Swift, right? Like he doesn't create any yards on his own. It's like he has 2 plays a game where you're like, yeah, that guy looks like, and then the rest are all kind of strikeouts, right? Yeah, he's definitely he's kind of like Kenneth Walker with less better PR. But I mean, Kenneth Walker has better PR.
He's Kenneth Walker with worse PR is really funny.
But I mean, Rome again. This is the drumbeat, right? They told us all off season like Rome is going to be the wide receiver 1. Like he's going to be the lead target in this offense. And through these 2 weeks, he absolutely has been. So you feel really good about what you have with Roma Dunze. We like the match a lot, and he was part of my DFS core picks last week. If what Ray was talking about, he was in my core picks for wide receiver. I do think this is actually an okay spot for DJ Moore as well. But again, big picture, Roma Dunze looks like he's going to be at least a wide receiver 2+ kind of the remainder of the season. It's a tremendous matchup for everyone in this game. There's not one player in this game you could tell me that if you were like, I like this guy, and I'd be like, no. But I think this is a smoke him if you got him game.
Colston Loveland.
Sure, I would still be like, maybe this is the week. I guess both of these defenses, because I actually came out of the first Cowboys game, and we talked about now because we have the sample builds. Now we have 2 Eagles games where they couldn't throw. But I came out of that first Cowboys game thinking it was a Matt Eberflus thing for maybe the Eagles. Like, man, maybe they just faced all the zone coverage, and Eberflus just made them throw underneath and all these checkdowns. And like maybe this is a restrictor plate on the Cowboys. They're not going to give up all these huge plays, and maybe the Cowboys don't end up running enough plays because Matt Eberflus is playing all this zone. Everyone's throwing underneath. And Russell Wilson was like, I'm throwing over the top of all these guys. Like, because that's what we want. We want the Cowboys to give up explosives, right? We'll give up explosives. So then your offense gets the ball. They've got to answer with explosives, and we're off to the races.
That's how we get Dak Prescott to be 2025 Joe Burrow. That is the formula. If we want, as we drafted, hopefully all off season, if we want Dak Prescott to be 2025 Joe Burrow, that's the formula. And we saw it in week 2 against the Giants, right? And so like that might be where we're headed. To your point though about how you like everybody in this game, I did want to give you an opportunity in a public forum to walk back the fact that you called Caleb Williams a trust in the worksheet preview for this game. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity in public here to walk that back if you choose to.
No, yeah, and I'm already seeing an early potential ownership. He's looking like the number 1 cash game. Now, again, this will change if Jaden Daniels is ruled out. I will see Mariota kind of flip that, but he is really cheap in DFS though. So I'm seeing that he's going to be really popular in DFS, but he's ranked in the industry as a QB1 too this week. So it's not just me. I think a lot of people are going to it because not only do you have like the Russ passing stuff, but the Cowboys have also allowed the most scrambling yardage to quarterbacks through 2 games. And we have seen Williams have a little bit more propensity to run early in the season as well. So we get a little bit of rushing with him as well. So yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. Like, I mean, but this matchup is like, so it's all about pressure, right? With Caleb Williams, it's the same thing going back to last year. We started there under pressure. He's 23rd in completion rate, 43.8% of passes, 4.4 yards per pass attempt under pressure. That's 27th. He's also taken 6 sacks. Pressure to sack rate through college, through year 1, always been a thing with Caleb Williams. But the Cowboys, again, Matt Eberflus has been playing really passively. They just brought in Jadeveon Clowney, who's on like his 37th. Like everyone gets a year of Jadeveon Clowney at this point. But they're 23rd in pressure rate. They're 26th in blitz rate. They played man coverage, the lowest rate in the NFL. It's like absurd, like rate too. It's like under 5%. And when they haven't gotten to the quarterback and created pressure, quarterbacks are 39 of 47 passing against them, 11 yards per pass attempt and 2 touchdowns. So, again, fresh off of rejuvenating the career of Russell Wilson and prolonging our Jackson Dart run out. It's just this is what it is, man. We gotta follow it.
To your point, Caleb Williams is the QB6 right now in rushing fantasy points per game. So it is happening for him in that regard, and I'm actually with you on this one as much as
if he does though, when we get to Sunday morning or like Saturday, and he's tracking to still be the number 1 quarterback, I will be looking for pivots away from that.
I think that's fair. All right. As always, let's bring this home with our Uncut Gems. Actually, before we do that, I do want to remind you, those 3 games, every other game available, in-depth, player-by-player preview from Retriebar. All the stats you would ever want to know about week 3 available as part of the Sharp Fantasy Package, which you can get for just $1 for week 3 using promo code ANGLE. So make sure you go check that out at sharp.football. Let's bring things home with Uncut Gems. These are players who are available on a lot of waiver wires, or they're on benches in deep leagues. So we don't necessarily think that they're great plays, but we think that they can outpace their expectations this week. If you're desperate, you're really looking for somebody, these are people who might be able to put up a startable score for you. So who you got, Rich?
Yeah, mine's going to be a Frankenstein because it's a caveat for we don't know for sure if he's actually going to be starting.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do Marcus Mariota, and I'm going to give you a pivot for Marcus Mariota as well if Jaden Daniels practices on Friday. But you know, you had sent this out in the waiver wire column, but when we saw Mariota play last year, he didn't even play a full game in either game. He was the QB8 in scoring, and he was the QB6 in scoring. He had 19.6 fantasy points and 26 fantasy points. He threw for 9.1 yards per pass attempt on his 44 passes. He completed just under 78%. He had 4 touchdowns. He ran 18 times for 92 yards and a touchdown. One of those games, he scored 26 fantasy points in 1/2 of football. You had to stat he averaged more yards per or more fantasy points per drop back than Lamar Jackson did. That's not us saying he's better than Lamar Jackson. It's just add context to how good he was per play for fantasy football when he played. The Raiders haven't been nearly as bad defensively as I kind of thought they would be opening the year, but they are still 22nd in passing points allowed. They're still 23rd in yards allowed per pass attempt. They're 19th in completion rate. This is a team with a rest advantage. They are at home. This is just a really favorable matchup. If Jaden Daniels does practice on Friday and does play, my other pivot is going to be Sam Darnold. So your 2B conglomerate here is if you're going to pick. We did see another team that didn't do anything we thought they were going to do in week 1 in terms of like Clint Kubiak play action passing game. came back and did it in week 2. They had the lowest rate of play action in week 1. They were top 10 in play action in week 2. Darnold did throw his 2 interceptions on play action passes, but he also threw for 12 yards per pass attempt, which we saw last year under Kevin O'Connell. Like he had big, enormous splits using play action and not. Without the use of play action, he was at 7.6 yards per target. Saints have allowed 18.3 fantasy points to Kyler Murray and 21.8 fantasy points to Mac Jones to open the year. So at home, huge home favorite. A team that also doesn't get pressure. They're 30th in pressure, the Saints. I believe Sam Darnold in this QB apocalypse that is week 3 already, he moves into kind of like a streaming with upside category if you didn't land one of the other. I actually don't even think like guys like Wentz and Browning are better options than him. So I would rather have Darnold than those guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm actually in a super flex league in which I have Lawrence and Darnold as my second option behind Jalen Hurts. And I'm pretty sure I'm playing Darnold over Lawrence this week. So that's kind of where we are a little bit with him. I want one more Mariota stat here because I'm with you. I'm all in on Mariota if he gets the start. But Mariota has played at least 30 snaps in 16 games if we go back to the start of the 2022 season. In those 16 games, he's averaged 36 rushing yards, and he has 5 rushing scores in those games. So you're getting that floor. We saw him show the ceiling last year. Yeah, I'm all in on Mariota if he ends up getting this start. My guy is going to be Dontavian Wicks, who obviously is going to be stepping into a larger role with Jaden Reed out. I actually looked up the splits with Jaden. He didn't play, like you mentioned in the worksheet. He didn't play a ton of 1 and 2 wide receiver sets, but I looked up the splits with Jaden Reed off the field last Thursday, and Wicks only ran 3 fewer routes than Romeo Doubs. He only ran 1 fewer route than Golden, like overall throughout the course of that game. He actually led those 3 in targets with 5 targets. But this is the important part about Dontavian Wicks. This is why I'm willing to get hurt again by Dontavian Wicks after kind of what we saw last year, is that since the start of last season, Dontavian Wicks is the wide receiver 11 in target rate per route among 105 qualified receivers. 105 receivers, he's the wide receiver 11 in target rate per route. When he runs routes, he gets targets. Last year, he dropped a lot of them. That wasn't great, but that has not been a problem for him in his first season. It has yet to be a problem for him, obviously, on limited targets. This season, if you get targets, you are probably a good receiver. He gets targets. I like this passing game. As everybody who listens to this podcast knows, I've been in on this passing game all the way back into the preseason. Drafted a ton of Jordan Love. Unfortunately, drafted a ton of Golden. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that as we move forward. And I have a ton of Wicks on best ball. I think I ended up with like 45 to 50% Wicks just because of where he was going and Jaden Reed's foot thing. So maybe this is wish casting for me, but like if a receiver earns targets and now they're getting on the field, there you go. Right. That's kind of where we are.
Hey, you can't drop the ball if they don't throw it to you.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. And to be fair, like I said, he only had issues last year. He hasn't dropped a pass yet this year, and as a rookie, he had 58 targets and only dropped 2 of them. So what we know, drop rates like aren't sticky, but getting open and getting targets is like target earning ability. So that's what you want to bet on. And in this particular matchup, it lines up, right? Like you brought like the man coverage stuff, and he had a quote. I'd put it in our props chat about him. Like they asked him about the Browns man coverage. He got real excited about it because so far in his career, he's been targeted on 33.3% of his routes against man coverage compared to a 21.2% rate against zone. Through 2 weeks of this season, again, small sample, he's been targeted on 41.7% of his routes against man coverage. This is what the Browns do. So, and I'm curious to see too, if the Packers are forced to throw more than they even want to through game script, just because the run defense for the Browns is so good.
No, I mean, they're just going to run Josh Jacobs into walls.
They will. You're right. They were 2.5 yards at a time. Someone in my DFS chat
did it last week.
Yeah. Someone in my DFS chat last night when I was talking about, I didn't think Jacobs was a great tournament player. They're like, well, he could have 60 yards and 3 touchdowns. I was like, if that's your thesis for playing a guy, I was like if you're telling me that you think it's probable he has 60 yards but needs 3 touchdowns, like that's not a good tournament play at face value.
Yeah. But also, he could have 60 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. So
like, 60 and 3. Yeah.
I'm just saying that is possible. That could happen. All right, that's it for us. We really appreciate you listening. If you got to this point, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast and your audio player of choice. We appreciate all of that. Remember, take advantage of this great deal we have running. Promo code ANGLES, ANGLES, for $1. You can get the fantasy football package for just $1 for week 3. Make sure you take advantage of that. And Rich and I will be back to talk to you next week.